had some side discussions that we were chatting about, me and the Southhound here, and we decided to include you in the discussion, bring you on board, and allow you to hear some of our thoughts. And these weren't specifically about the full episode of Picard or any specific episode, but these were more about how would I phrase it? The speculation of the overall series. Where would it go? What things are happening? The production value, the production choices. And that kind of led down a road of just discussing the series in a whole. And so what we kind of ended up on discussion-wise that we decided to hold off and then bring it to you guys is the kind of Picard's fate now. His death. Because the question is, are they going to kill him at the end of the show? It was kind of our premise of it. Is he going to be, the end of his life? We know he has the brain thing. That was a thing in the original canon. That's why I don't have a problem with it, because that was always something that was kind of like the distant threat. And now we're in
when you say the brain thing, are we talking about the thing they brought up in Nemesis, or are we talking about that childhood illness?
No, we're talking about thing Q in the end of the series. Because at the end of the original TNG,
you're talking. Okay, I got you. When he was becoming basically senile and having those problems.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that was what it was tied
That was
into.
a childhood illness, and I don't see why that has an influence, but I see what you're talking about.
No, I don't think it was supposed to be a child. It was supposed to be like a syndrome or something, some kind of alien, something Federation disease.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. The illness I was thinking about, that agreement issue, was a childhood illness that he had.
I know what you're talking now.
Super sensitive to sounds.
Why he needed the blood or something. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
So we are kind of going, are they going to, because we both agree that the way they killed Kirk off in Generations was not the greatest way. It was kind of an anticlimactic.
Insulting.
Yeah.
To a character.
It was an anticlimactic death to the great Captain Kirk. Obviously, he was sacrificing his life, but not in a so much meaningful way that I think that most fans would have liked overall. I always remember that it's kind of the sad, I think I would like Generations a lot more as a movie if it wasn't for the way Kirk died. I think that even as a young man watching that movie, I always felt that was not my favorite method of his death. So we're looking forward now to hearing, going, okay, are they going to try to give Picard a hero's death? So with Picard's possible death coming up in the franchise, I mean, I would assume that's going to be something really late into it. We kind of were theorizing in the sense of how they would do it and what would be a worthy death for the character. And with current franchises, it feels like they always try to give the old lead character two types of things, right? An overly dramatic, sacrificial death that's kind of overplayed at this point, or unfortunately the meaningless death in things like Star Wars, more recent movies. So I feel like with his character, my initial thought actually, what I would love, and as kind of a long-term fan, is I would love to see the Q involved. I know it's something they'll never do, but I would actually totally love if Q, because Q kind of thought as Picard as like his adopted doggy, pretty much.
Yeah,
is kind of like the stray dog, or maybe not even the stray dog, probably more like the one he paid for, because he kind of bought the farm with dealing stuff with Picard with the Continuum.
That's true.
So
he found himself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah,
Picard,
dealing with Picard. So I wouldn't hate the idea they actually never kill Picard, in the sense of they remove him from the story with something involving Q. Would actually be quite fun to me, in the sense of him somewhat Stargate SG-1 ascending type thing, or Q kind of sending him off into the future, really far into the future of the Federation, or humanity in a whole, in a positive way, like the ultimate end of the human race. Because I always felt that was one of the cool things with the Q, was that even Q acknowledged that the human race would actually catch up and possibly surpass the Q as what they were, because he kind of acknowledged the humanity's drive to push forward was something Q didn't really even have in them.
And that was during Voyager, right?
That was during Voyager's run, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought.
That was when he tried to have a kid with Janeway.
Janeway was the lover, Picard was the dog.
Right? And that's why I was, obviously of all the races, Q has a soft spot for humanity, and obviously Picard and well, the Federation side of humanity and Picard and Janeway. So that would be like probably my ideal thought of how do you put Picard into a non-sacrificial like end of his life, because other than that, it had to be like a peaceful death. Because I really don't want to see him do a sacrificial death unless it's on such a freaking poignant level that it's like, those all those perfect sacrifice moments and something, but it has to build up. There has to be so many levels to it that when it happens, it's like there was no other way. And here's the reason why a lot of times it doesn't work for me. There's always another way. It's kind of like why the Holdo maneuver thing, and use that as an example. Her sacrificial death was silly to me because why did she need to die? Oh, there's no autopilot. Well, there's droids. Oh, well, the droids can't. Yeah. Well, wait, what? Droids fly things all the time. So to me, her death had no meaning. And so for me, if it's just something like him being like, I got to sacrifice myself for the team, and you're like, no, you don't. Or that it's contrived in the story. It's that like contrived
I'm
story.
the only one with the command codes, and I must be the one that locked the door and blah blah blah. You're like,
yeah,
no, unacceptable.
And not even now in the show, I like the example of it when David Tennant's doctor dies.
That's what I was gonna say.
To save.
When you said
Donna's,
poignant, I'm like, that's a perfect example.
It's a good one, but I don't think it'd work for Picard. But
No,
it has the emotional weight to it that I'd want to see in it. I don't think
but
that,
like you said, it has the setup.
yes,
It has that creation, has that emotional attachment. And if you remember before, since he was expecting to die, he was expecting to die in a blaze of glory, right? Jumps out of the ship, lands on the ground, got the gun, clicking it back and forth. He's expecting to die here. His moment. And then everything clears, the dust settles, and it's just the doctor. And then the knocks.
yep.
And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, that is brilliant. That's epic. But that would take a season to develop for Picard, not 8 episodes, a legitimate season and an actual care about this character. And there's no way you could develop that in 6 more episodes to make it feel earned. If you have to make a death earned. And there's just no way they'll get away with it.
Yeah, and that one again was one of those unique, beautiful ones because it was the tie-in with Donna and her tragic story. With her losing it, him being kind of this like cutesy. I mean, it was also the actor's charisma. He was this cutesy old grandpa guy who they slowly brought into the show, and he was just like there randomly, and then all of a sudden he was like, "Hi, doctor. I'm sorry, I'm in the room, and only it's a dead safe type thing."
And the doctor's anti-hero conversation with himself is also epic. That argument with himself. Why? I've just lived after this. Why should I die for you? Why should I give myself up for you? I am a Time Lord victorious. I am near God. How dare you be here?
And that's the difference. Is the doctor's. That's when the doctor had the great, really God complex elements to him, which what made him such a great character. And that was not Picard. Doesn't have a God complex.
No, quite the opposite.
Yeah, he'd be more the humble. He's already relatively humble character. I would say actually he's pretty.
It's hard. He's a weird character. I mean, like I said, Kirk was the fire and the brash, but he was also the one who, he was powerful, but he was thoughtful. Picard was the.
Actually, if you think about it,
100 years later in the Federation. Yeah.
Well, if you think about it, Picard's actually kind of a paragon character.
Say again.
Like a paragon.
Paragon.
Yeah, like he's almost.
Explain.
He was almost at his full peak at the beginning of his run. Like as a character, he has an arc, but it's not a major arc because he's already, as a captain, he was a lot older than Kirk. He was already lived like a full run. He was near.
He was supposed to be like 60 in the canon, which is weird.
Wait, you mean on the Enterprise when it was Next Generation? I don't think he was that old, but
yeah. Maybe he's 90. According to the canon right now, he's 97 years old. Even though he's only played by an 80-year-old actor, he's 97 in Picard.
I didn't realize that.
I didn't either. It wasn't until some people had pointed out online, and I checked it out, and I was like, "Oh,
okay,
weird,
interesting,
funky." So he was supposed to be 60 plus years during
Okay.
his time on the
So
Enterprise. And
even
yeah,
more
he would have
verifies,
to be.
even more goes to my point then that he was kind of a paragon. Like I said, he was kind of like a Gandalf character. So like Gandalf's role isn't to grow in the Lord of the Ring movies. He does
Although he
change.
does.
He does, but in and not in a way because he changed who he was. He kind of had like a reboot actually as a
Exactly.
character in a way.
A legitimate resurrection
Yeah.
slash XP. He's like XP5, XP500. I was like, yeah.
Oh, I love that scene.
Me too.
When he's like, "You have no power here, Gandalf the Grey," and he's like, "Yeah, I love that scene." And he's like, "No."
I love that.
Oh,
It's
it's
so
so good,
awesome.
so good. Like that's in a movie that's pretty low magic in the sense of like there's magic in the world, but it's not like
Yeah, very. Yeah, they don't really hit it very hard in
y-
those movies.
yeah,
At
it's
least
a
not in that
pretty
way.
soft. It's like a soft level magic system. It's actually more akin to Star Wars original
Yes.
series, where yeah they had the Force, but it wasn't the be all end all thing. It was just a little bit. But anyway, so with Picard, where would you like this? How would you see his? I've spoke my idea, kind of how I'd see it. How would you see his end for the
Yeah,
series?
I mean, like I said, I can kind of like your idea on the Q. Cause, I mean, because when you think about it, the first episode of Star Trek involves Q.
Mhm.
The last episode involves Q.
Mhm.
It's kind of like the bookend to the Picard series. So I like your idea in that Picard has impressed the Q and the Q continuum in such a way where they're willing to give him a unique honor
Mhm.
in his
That's
situation.
kind of
I
see.
think that would
Honor
be
is
cool
a
because,
good
like you
word.
said, yeah, exactly, it'd be like an honorable thing. So I really do like that idea. It's like, you know, Picard, you're a unique specimen of human being. You've been involved with us for this time. Blah 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 blah. We are going to give you an honor of sending you into so you can see where humanity is going to go. It's not going to change anything for you. You're still going to die or whatever, but you're not going to influence the future now. And I think that would be kind of a
Yeah, you
cool.
push him far enough ahead that he can't change it, but he can be maybe part of it or see it or something, extend his
Yeah,
life in a way.
but he's not going to be instrumental. It's not like we're going to
Right.
go and do stuff now.
Agreed. I think that
So
I
I
mean,
agree with you. I think that's actually a very poetic end. So I would definitely want to see that as number one.
which is
That's not
not
going to
far off,
happen.
which isn't far off if you think about it, what they kind of did with Kirk. Cuz they stuck him in essentially heavenly limbo
Yeah, that's true.
prior
And
to his
prior to his
death.
death, his
Um
ignominious death,
which actually they should have just left him in the like it'd be more interesting if they just left him in the limbo.
but they couldn't see because he dies on the planet before it gets hit. Therefore, he can no longer be in the ribbon.
True, but they should have just let him like they should have just not
I
killed him
agree
and
with
put
you.
him in the ribbon.
Yeah, they
Because I
should
think
have developed a different way. I mean, yeah, I guess that was the hard part about transferring over generations, is because since Kirk had never died technically in the movies, you just kind of assume everyone's dead, and you just kind of assume. So that I think that was probably actually more my problem with that is the need to kill off um, Kirk in the mean in the need. It's like, okay, you look, you're in the 24th century, you know he's dead. Do we really need to see when and why and how he died? Is it really that important? And I think that was probably my biggest bugaboo about that.
right.
And I would say the same thing about Picard, other than the fact that we know they're going to do it. So it's
I
like,
think so. I would be
I-
very surprised if at the end of this series run, because I would expect. I think they have 3 seasons locked down from what I know. I believe
from what
financially.
they've said, whether that's true or not, is
They're trying to keep their streaming service up right now, and
yeah,
I think
sure.
the general people watching this one, considering that I think, and like we talked about yesterday, which was that yeah, we have a lot of critiques on the show, but at the same time, it's not unwatchable to show. So if you're a person who just wants to watch some sci-fi entertainment, which there's not much of these days, it does scratch an itch. Maybe not in the most effective way, but it is better than nothing. Like there's things when you're like, dude, this is not better than nothing, but I think this show is better than nothing. So I think it does scratch the itch for a lot of people who are Star Trek fans who are like, you know what, this is worth. It's like I know you said that if we weren't doing the reviews on this stuff, you probably wouldn't watch it. And I would probably be on the opposite side of that. Is I'd probably watch this out of interest so far. Again, it might drop down. We don't know if there's gonna be a bait and switch coming up here, which there might because, like I said, we're still haven't met the crew of the ship that's going to go out there who seem like they were supposed to be kind of main characters in the show. At this point, with what's gone on so far, I would much rather have his current Romulan caretakers actually be like, well, we have a ship that's kind of clandestinely cloaked over
Yeah,
your
I
house.
agree. Those
Um,
characters are cool.
I,
They
I
really
think
are.
I think they could have been an interesting like old. We talked about this before with Dad. So like I know this like I said, if you're watching, I know there's a lot of random kind of things, but these are just like I said, this is a pickup conversation about this thing. But me and Dad were talking about the movie Red. Remember, Retired and Extremely
Love that
Dangerous
movie.
with Bruce Willis, and I forget Bruce Willis and two other. It was a female actress and the other
Yeah,
crazy old
I
guy.
wouldn't know their names. I
Yeah,
know.
I
I
forget their
mean, I
names.
knew. I have them in my head. I knew who they are, but
Yeah, if you look it up. Um, but the movie is essentially a bunch of retired black ops type people who are retired and extremely dangerous individuals, and still to the day during the show, the movie is dangerous and they're capable. And so I like the idea of older casts sometimes. Like I know a lot of times in Hollywood they're like, we gotta have the younger, hip, like young and edgy. They need to be really cool and like suave. And you're like, well, yeah, I mean sometimes that's nice, but also it's kind of cool when you get to see a guy or a group of people who have been training their entire lives to accomplish the mission and put them against a really hard, unsolvable. It's the unstoppable force hits the immovable object type thing. With high level characters who've been dealing with these certain situations their entire life, and I think that can be really cool. So I don't I right now the dynamic is I like to see this dynamic continue, but I feel like when you see like I said the trailers for what they have planned forward, we're gonna move into the oh it's the young and edgy crew with just Captain Picard versus like oh look at an older Worf like we talked about a little bit too. I'll let you continue here, but after is the continuation oh older Geordi, an older Worf, an older Will Riker, and they're kind of on their mission. Now granted I get there are budget things and there's commitments and blah 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 blah.
sure.
But again, they had Picard with these two other actors, and I'm like, I'm sure they'd be happy to be leads with him on the show. I feel like that is a missed up. I think it's a missed opportunity. Again, we don't know what happens yet, but at this point, I feel it's a missed opportunity.
I definitely agree it's a missed opportunity. But like I said, and again, Patrick Stewart admitted to this, is that he did not want those guys on the show. He
Did
did
he
not
actually say
want this.
that?
Yeah, I told you the first time, and you didn't believe me, but he actually said that. He
Okay,
actually
I just
said
wasn't sure if he
that
was
it was his
implying it.
choice not to bring them on the show.
Well, and that's too bad. I think that
Also, it was his choice to put in the line, "Oh, I was never much for science fiction." If you recall
uh,
that comment in that second one.
that did strike me as something that was kind of a thing, but at the same time, I do believe Picard, everything that he like in this original series. I know that actually probably is more of a Patrick Stewart comment. But as the character of Picard, though,
Sure. He was a Shakespeare guy, and
oh,
he
totally.
was, yeah, I get it. He was reading, ironically, old literature from Earth. It's so strange that he'd still be so invested in Earth literature with
Yeah,
all
it's just
these
because
other
he was a
cultures.
worldly, he was just worldly, right? Because they're not going to write a Klingon
I know,
proverb,
right?
They're
Yeah,
not,
right.
they're like, it doesn't, it
Klingon
doesn't,
proverb.
right? They're not going to try to
Skip
reinvent
on the
the wheel.
prune juice. Trust me.
Right. They know that people are going to be watching this and go, oh, it's Shakespeare. It's old.
Sure.
In our mind, it'd be like, oh, yes. He could be like, yeah, Tom Clancy. But obviously for us, that's too modern to
Yeah.
work versus for him, that'd be like, oh, that's still a 300-year-old book series. But again, things like that always translate.
600.
No. 23rd
Do
century.
you know when Shakespeare was around?
No,
Do you
no.
realize what century they're in?
I meant like a Tom
Oh, for
Clancy.
Tom Clancy.
Yeah, like a Tom Clancy.
yeah. I got
That's
yeah,
still
40,
300
yeah,
years
sure.
old. But again, that might not translate over as well because obviously that's very modern. A lot of the Shakespeare stuff translate over because it's kind of ambiguous simplicity of world history. Where you're like, oh,
Oh, sure.
this
Yeah, it's not.
person's warning this person. It's kind of like why music. I think you'll have. There never will be another like Mozart or Beethoven until we reset
No.
like our copyright stuff. Like again, because copyrights the way they are, all that kind of stuff. Until music, I mean, there'll be like maybe someone pop up. You never can say never, right? Like that's silly. But
Sure.
the way things are set up in these days, there's so much music and there's a different style. Like it's just what is considered great is going to come in less and last shorter, I think, than the greats because the greats just kind of now are ambiguous to culture across the world of like these, you're like Chopin, Bach, You
And they're
know,
also consider actual real culture, and you can, I think the reason is because they actually are very good. I know people will argue that, but they probably haven't actually taken the time to really sit down and listen to some of what we consider the more classical artists out there. And I can guarantee you there are things for every type of music person who loves those things. They just have to be willing to find it because, there's some very dark, deep, Locrian music out there in the old classics that fit just as well into the hard rock, into the metalhead type, because they're following the exact same chord structures that those guys invented 250 years beforehand.
yeah.
So it wasn't like those people were reinventing the wheel. It was merely an instrumentation change. And of course, you know, lyrics, which are questionable at
Yeah.
best.
Well, yeah. I mean, like I said, there's great stuff. Like I said, it all comes to taste. Like I heard some stuff today that I was listening to. I'm like, oh, that's really good. Again, stuff that I found interesting while I was mowing the lawn. What can you
Sure.
do? Um, so
But what I was going to
yeah,
say
go
when
ahead.
you were asking about the concepts on the show, um, with some of these, when these new his new crew starts joining on there, I like I said, first of all, he intentionally made sure that the old Vanguard wasn't going to participate in this television show, which is sad because I would agree with you. Star Trek was supposed to be more of um, a cerebral experience as opposed to a shoot 'em up. Now, was there action? Of course. Was there excitement? Absolutely. But that wasn't its main vein. It wasn't Star Wars. Star Trek was its own separated type of thing. It
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to be the drama of the intellectual clash that was supposed to be the driving fun and enjoyment and tension throughout these things. Being that said, that's when you can allow an old group of people on the show. I mean, how stupid was it watching Picard run around and be dragged by a 24-year-old girl while they were shooting at them? I mean,
Yeah, and it was definitely one
right?
of the
It's just
weakest points. It
painful,
was
right?
one
Because
of the
you're
weakest
like,
points for sure.
yeah, he's like, I mean, it was funny in one hand because he's like climbing up the stairs and he's like only climbed up like 10 stairs. And he's like, I, I, I need a break. I'm thinking, yes, yes, you
That's
would.
that's totally
And
fair.
I would,
Yeah.
and if I had a gun, I would blow you away in a heartbeat because it would be no difficulty whatsoever. You'd be moving like an old person on their freaking cart in front of them. So that's why I think they did miss that opportunity, because if they did bring the old Vanguard in and wanted to have older characters, which they clearly don't, because they're going to erase Picard, he's going to become the Bosley, and it's going to be Charlie's Angels running out there in the future of the Picard series with all these young, edgy versions of Firefly, Serenity, and kinds of Farscape kind of people. And it is sad because they missed out on having a more mature, dynamic group of people where you could bring in experiences that we haven't seen
Mm-hmm.
and seeing how those changed those characters. Is Worf now more Klingon now because he's kind of left Starfleet and wants to engage back in those roots that he got kicked away from because he was an adoptee? Is Riker still that fiery, brash, Captain, you need to stay here and I'm going to go out there? Or has he chilled out and cooled and tempered himself and started to use his intelligence as a greater weapon than his clearly physically imposing person? I mean, that was something that was huge for that character.
Mm-hmm.
LaForge, can he finally see? Does he ever realize? Did he ever actually want to do that? I mean, that was kind of a cool thing at first contact when he had the little dial changing eyes, which was new then compared to the visor. That was really cool stuff.
Yeah, that was
Um,
actually, nowadays you probably never see them do that upgrade for a character, and I think that was such a cool. Um, Even now, I think that was a cool choice that they were like, you know what, things are getting more advanced, and we gave you ocular implant eyes. That's cool.
yeah, and it was really cool. And so I think they are missing out on some real opportunities. And like we already know why partially, but again, as I had mentioned previously, it's not Star Trek. That's not what they're looking for. They want to suck in character. They want to bring a character in that they know everyone knows, put them in that universe, but it's not going to look like what we considered Star Trek in the past. And
It's
we've
true.
seen that in the first two episodes. And my guess is it's going to continue that route. And I mean, like I said, we've seen CSI on the show. We've seen kind of a blacklist kind of concept, and like I said, in the way they're shooting it, I don't mind that. You can always change the texture of a show, but still allow it to be the show. I have no problem with updating that kind of stuff because yeah, the original was in the 60s, and then it was in the late 80s, and then it was in the mid 19 in the 90s up until the early aughts. Sure, I expect the texture to change, but that's not the only thing they're changing.
And that's a perfect segue into the thing that aren't changing, ironically, which we were talking about earlier as well, which is runtime and story structure when you're no longer dealing with a network standard restriction. So, when shows were on normal network, ABC, NBC, CBS, etc., everything's around 43 minutes, 42, depending on the show, because it needs 17 to 18 minutes of commercial breaks throughout the show. What's weird to me, and we discussed this earlier, is that now we're stuck. There's a lot of shows that have broken away from that, right? A lot of shows, when the moment they're on Netflix, the moment they're on a streaming service, they're like, oh, now we have an hour to tell a story. You got some breathing room in these scenes. Now, this show almost has too much breathing room in some levels. It does have some nice, like I said, for me, the editing does have some nice breathing room. I don't mind it. Like, to me, the pacing is slow because it's just the story is not developing quickly. Like, we're just slowly building this story. But where the pacing that I feel could be squeezing more backstory elements, more explanations of stuff without, showing, not telling elements inside of those. Instead of being 42 minutes, give me 47 minutes, give me 50 minutes, give me an hour. You look at a lot of these shows when they're off the thing and they're an hour goes by fast. So, if every episode of the thing was an extra 10 minutes of plot, and again, not the same structure where it's like every episode right now is definitely built in like this three story structure ish. I can't really say it's a strong one because so far nothing's really happened that's enough three structure. I'd say episode 2 is pretty good three structure. Adventure, rejection, possibilities, cliffhanger. That was kind of the structure in this one.
I guess I kind of see the worst of both worlds in the way they developed this. Um, like you said, it's weird that when you don't have the confines of that time, that you would do two things. You would still limit your episodes, time periods, and then also have a limited amount of episode. I mean, 8 is not a lot. If they were 8 hour and a half, that would be a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they were 8 hour, 10 minutes, that would be a lot. But 8 45-minute episodes is nothing. I mean, think about all the science fiction shows that are out there. They usually would have 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. I mean, Stargate consistently hit 20 and over 20. And I know I use that
back
as
then in 24, I think 22, 24, I think was standard until the current, 2010s up. I think used to be, 24 used to be 24 for a reason.
I get it. I guess I'm sure things are getting very expensive. Things are getting very competitive. If you weren't spending hundreds of $1 millions on crappy directors and executives, J.J. Abrams, then maybe you would actually have some money to actually put in your shows. And I can understand that there's always those types of issues too. But I do find it odd that you would eliminate over 50% of your time. And then in this episode, in this circumstance for Picard, they threw so much stuff in that first episode. Destruction of Romulus, now a synthetic issue, Borg. You have so many threads that you've started in the beginning of one episode in a season where it's almost too crammed for the 45-minute time frame, so it didn't let it breathe and expand. But then they have the time to do nothing for an episode. Only then to now leave themselves with 6 episodes to now have to start to put those threads together and start solving problems. What was that?
I believe it's 6 episodes still left to go. So.
Okay, so even if it was we'll use 6, and even if it was 8 more, and it was 10 episodes, you don't have that much, and you're going to keep it to 45 minutes. You can't waste. You can't just shove one episode full of exposition and problems and threads, and then the next one deal with nothing. In fact, create more problems, because all you're going to end up doing is it's going to be a very inconsistent way of telling the story, where it's like one is information overload and it seems so packed and nonsensical, and then you go to the next episode and there's nothing. And there's nothing where, and I mean, Tolkien was a word genius, he was a master, but there's that brilliant quote that Bilbo has when he comments, and he says, I feel thin, I feel like butter scraped over too much bread. And I think to myself, that's exactly what these filler episodes feel like. It's like, okay, do you guys not actually have any story to tell, and that's why you do this? Or are you guys just so incapable of continuing a consistent storyline? I mean, again, if you had 8 episodes, I'd make them an hour and a half long, and the first one would be the introduction to the synth. If we're keeping their frame of story, would be an introduction to into the synth stuff, and those issues and running into the girl. The interview could be another episode, along with her finding him and all this stuff. I mean, all that stuff happens so fast. Finds her, gets attacked, doesn't know who he is. Don't we feel familiar? Don't we feel connected? Bam, kills her off. I'm going to go on a mission to find this other one because I find out there's duplicates. I mean, within 24 hours. And then the next one is like 4 days and nothing happens. He's just wandering around doing his thing. I need to find it. Let's CSI the room. Let's go chat with the admiral. Let's go do. And plus, there's times where it goes night to day and it makes absolutely no sense. And I'm like, okay, are we in a different part of the world?
I haven't
Or
noticed that, but
did we
it
just
wouldn't
get
surprise
lost?
me. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. So that, just so we don't run too long on this one, just pick up.
No, of course.
I have two pickup items though that I think that we didn't talk about on our review video, just because we had some other things to talk about. The first
You
one
mean
is
because a certain someone wouldn't stop talking?
actually he talked far less than you think he did. To be, I'll actually, when you actually look at the audio, he
I
talks
know.
far less than you think. So
It's true.
I'm
It's
not
just
going
in
to give.
spigots.
I'm not going
It's
to
in
give.
these- It's like.
I'm not going to give Shepard too much grief because when I actually looked at it, I'm like, he actually talked probably the least during that video. He just had a really long piece there. But I was going to say the one that we didn't talk about that I just want to be like, it was kind of dumb, which was the Romulan time detector of people in a room. That felt what people described it as something very Doctor Who-y, which is true. The actual one I would actually compare it, literally ripped off from, was Warehouse 13. Had a device
Yes.
for it, which in that show things are literally magic. Like it's not scientific. They're like, we don't understand why these things do it, and the reason they work is generally because it's something to do with like the human spirit and the will of life and stuff.
That's why I didn't like that show.
Oh, I like that. I love the actually. I really liked Warehouse 13. I thought it was a freaking great show. But it wasn't. They weren't trying to explain it though either. They admitted it was like, we don't know why this stuff does the stuff it does. That's why we put it in this warehouse so that it doesn't kill people, because pretty much everything in here will murder you slowly or quickly and make it.
It actually reminded me. I mean, I now that you've made that reference, totally, completely agree. But it reminded me of the Iron Man 3 movie when he's restructuring all like the people who, when there was the bombing or something like that, and he's restructuring everything. And I remember watching that going, there is no way you could possibly collect those data points and figure that out. It's
True.
impossible.
At least they're just using like what would be, a quadrillion calculations of math and like what things were based upon a previous thing. Essentially, I do agree with what you're saying, but it's a whole different thing. There's one thing to be like, oh, I have a vase shattered across the ground, and go, what did it look like before? Maybe 100-fold more complicated, right? But there's a whole other thing to be, paint the vase that was here yesterday.
Exactly. And not even that, I want you to tell me the words that were spoken in the room. That was the worst part.
Yeah,
you could argue heat signatures, maybe. You can still ambient heat signatures, but to actually hear them talking was...
Well, here's the thing.
Like,
they overcomplicated it with their technobabble, and that's why I just bring it up, because like I said, it's one of those ones where it's like, fine, I get it. You wanted a plot device, cool. But really, they should have just made it somehow like chronoton based, because the whole idea was, this is something that we don't let the Federation know about. Like, they're like, well, we lie about
yeah.
that.
And that's stupid line.
Just make
it's completely unreliable. We know that. That's what we wanted you to believe. I'm like,
yeah.
Because what? The Federation's never heard of disinformation or counterinformation 400 years from the CIA, and they still haven't figured that out? Are you kidding me?
Right.
I mean, that's
stupid. So that piece of equipment, I would have been like, oh, it's chronoton based. It kind of does what you're seeing is actually a projection of the past.
They used leptons. They're like inverted leptons.
Even in this, like I said, even in the world of Star Trek, I said the best they should have explained it through like some kind of chronoton that it bounces chronotons back like up to 24 hours or 48 hours, and you have to kind of tune it, and fine.
Or it's a probabilistic view. If they said it's probabilistic of what had happened, and then the situation looked different, I would have slightly given them a pass.
Or if it was a little more muddy, like, oh, this is kind of like shapes moving, but it literally was
like Nintendo pixels moving across.
Yeah, something like that. They overly made it like rendered too nicely, essentially. Again,
it was completely unbelievable. Even for the world they were in, it was completely unbelievable. That was the worst part. Not to mention, it was unbelievable. And supposedly the Romulans that were in there had scrubbed that information, and yet she was still able to extract ridiculously impossible information after
Well,
someone had cleaned it.
well, and the other thing there on that specific one would be, again, explaining things like that. You've been like, oh, it kind of uses chronotons to see like things in the past up to like 48 hours. We fine tune it, and we're gonna, since we know what the girl looks like, we're gonna overlay her image and the guy's image into the thing because we know what they look like. So it's kind of projecting a holographic image based upon what is extracting. Look at how fast I explained that, and I'm talking on top of my head. They took twice as long to explain it, and they're talking mumbo jumbo that doesn't even work in their
Two
universe.
times, you mean like that was like a 5-minute scene?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So that was the one, and then the other one is the picture I just texted you. So look at the picture I just texted you, and then tell me what's weird in the picture. I'll put it up on the screen for our viewers here.
Let's see here. What's weird? Other than the fact that's the Golden Gate Bridge with solar panels on it.
Yes, the solar panels. I thought that was
ridiculous.
Stupid. I thought that was stupid.
Yes, it is stupid.
The solar panels were like, wait, what? Because they have antimatter reactors throughout the, like the difference of energy between a solar panel and antimatter / fusion reactors is on a scale of, well, I mean,
are you telling me they're not using dilithium? I mean, wouldn't you be using dilithium power? You can create warp barriers and transport yourself. You're telling me that that same technology is being used to produce literally unlimited energy?
Well, they have fusion. I mean, they have fusion reactors. I mean, fusion we know in the sense of like what we know in the current day, energy wise, would be massive. And then, like I said, antimatter matter reactions are the, like, what is it? Something the size of a raisin would be as much fuel, like the entire fuel of a. I remember it was an analogy in a book once. It was like a raisin of antimatter would be equivalent of essentially an entire like space shuttle, like payload of fuel from all of it going up at once.
You mean like when you said you read it in a book? You mean like a
physics book,
like a Star Trek book?
No, like a physics book. They were like explain how much energy.
How if you can compute antimatter, we have no idea what it even looks like.
Of course you do. No, because you can compute. It's E equals m squared, so it's energy to mass, right? So if you have 1 gram of antimatter, it equals the equivalent of that energy. So what's the energy equal to the rocket fuel, right?
Yeah, but antimatter is a non-observed.
But the whole point of it is
you're just saying using real science as opposed. Okay.
Because antimatter, even if we've created like 1 or 2 atoms of it, but the whole point of it's taking antimatter plus matter equals all the energy of the 2 pieces.
Sure.
That's all. I mean, that's all it's supposed to be.
Right.
So,
I mean, your argument, like, okay, if you wanted to use the argument that like positrons and electrons are colliding with each other, like say at the CERN collide place, because positrons are kind of a type of energy, not really, but they do nullify themselves eventually, and they do produce energy. This is true.
So the point is, though, why would they be using?
Well, I know, and you know why. You lock it and you say agenda.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones that you're like, it's silly. I get why they did it.
The reason is because they're trying to push the agenda. See, Starfleet runs on clean solar panel energy. And you're like, no, it doesn't, because it's inferior. It's more costly to produce those things. It's not a very useful way of transferring that information.
And how much energy is Starfleet using? I mean, you're like the level, like you look at just
that
transporters.
Probably wouldn't run one water dispenser at Starfleet.
Well, it wouldn't run a replicator. Because think how much.
Wouldn't?
No, because again, you're creating matter from energy, right? Theoretically, every piece of it. Okay, you gotta think how much energy comes from a nuclear bomb is converting mass into energy, right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like I said, it wouldn't even be able to create his Earl Grey that he orders decaffeinated.
So
at the beginning of his thing.
Replicators are a fun technology that even in the canon make no sense, right? Like they're really cool. Yeah. They're cool sci-fi things that are really cool, but they're so technologically advanced because the energy needs, just like transporters, right? Transporters are so advanced that they're the one, like there's certain technologies that humans will never see in our lifetime. Like we're more likely to see something be like, oh yeah, we made this thing go faster than the speed of light or really close to it. We're never going to see transporters. Yeah, they got some guys like quantum teleporting a single atom somewhere, but whatever. That's like light physics.
But like you pointed out, how much energy are they consuming to transport one atom?
Well, and that's energy there. Yeah, exactly that. But like I said, if you're making the energy it takes to make a pasta in Star Trek, a plate of pasta. So you're like, hey, I want to is like a nuclear bomb going off essentially. Like
Exactly.
in reverse, it's taking the energy from nuclear bomb and going, boop, that's your salad now.
Yeah, to turn it into mass. That would be cool. Exactly. And
So
that's not that solar panel platform of stupidity on the Golden Gate Bridge.
yeah, and the solar panel would be like, so we
Stupid.
power like the lights on the bridge, and you're like, oh, okay. But yeah, so those are just two things at the end that I was just like, they're funny, they're silly, they're totally nitpicks that I'm just like, but like why? Again, I know they're plot things, and one's
Yeah.
just a visual effect thing, but it's just kind of silly. So
No, I
that's
agree with you. I'm glad you pointed that out. I mean, like I said, I saw it, rolled my eyes, and continued, but I like how you picked apart how
the physics.
not just like rolling your eyes, but like yeah, literally how dumb that is.
Well, and like I said, it's just the two levels, right? There's like the level of like, oh, we accept that things like holodecks and transporters exist in Star Trek because it's sci-fi. That's what makes sci-fi fun. There's things that don't
Yeah,
work,
sure.
but when you put things that we know how they work against it, you go, no. It's like when it's kind of like the other thing I noticed too, and this is totally nitpick. So totally nitpick.
I love nitpicks.
This one's funny though. It kind of because so the Anaheim Convention Center is what Starfleet is. So that's where in
Yes.
LA. So I've been there. I've worked there before actually on a project. So I know it very well.
The quantum archives.
No, not that part. In the most recent one, when he goes to meet the admiral, when the guy doesn't know.
Oh, when
where
he
he is.
actually goes
I've
to
literally been in
okay.
that space I've worked in before.
Right.
So it's hilarious in that because if you notice, the doors walking in are all on hinges.
Yes.
And I thought that was funny because I was like,
that made me laugh.
I know why you guys have hinges on the door because it would cost probably 20. No, it probably cost $200,000 to like replace those doors with slider doors or something, or probably cost $10,000 to do the CGI on it, which they probably should have done, to be honest.
The reason they did it was they wanted to go back to a more manual time.
Right. So I thought it was hilarious that they have the entire front of freaking Starfleet. And they're like, yeah, we don't have automated doors here. Everything else in the freaking Federation is automated doors and slider doors. And they're like, Starfleet headquarters? Nope. We have good old fashioned doors from the 21st century. You're welcome. So, again, that's a nitpick, but it was just kind of a funny visual thing because you're just like,
you're right.
oh, I don't think I've ever seen them ever use that. And they could have done it in CGI. I do get budgets. Like I said, it's not one that makes me mad.
Like I said, nothing that would be like, you dummies. You understand why, but it's funny.
It's funny visual things.
And
so
I just had one little nitpick, and then we can finish off here. It was during his time period when he's talking with the index inside the quantum archive, the holographic chick. Okay. He asks her a simple question. They've already okay, so he says, what is the name? He goes, what is this picture? And she goes, 1, 2, 4, 7, blah, 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 talks about stuff. He asks for the name. It takes her like 10 seconds to come up with the answer. I'm like,
I knew when you started saying that, I was like, I knew exactly where you're going because you're like, wait a second, this should be instantaneous. Like it shouldn't be no processing. It should just be
no. What's the name of this? Daughter. It shouldn't have been accessing. I'm thinking to myself, okay, even if there was so much information in this archive, which is stupid, she's already created a RAM cache with just the information that's Picard related, given the question that he asks her about the image specifically, which was funny because she didn't seem to have an issue figuring out that question. He asked her and she instantaneously responded, what is this? And she goes, oh, that's archive number 15, blah, 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 blah. This is when, which is also weird because she also knew that it was in his study, which is freaking creepy. So here she has that information. She's like, and I believe the other one's hanging in your study. I'd be like, why would you know that? Who would input that program information in there? But then he asks her the name, and it takes her 5 seconds with like freaking out to figure out that. I'm like, that's stupid. That was dumb.
That was one of those choices that you're like, But yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, guess what? A pregnant pause for the answer of something stupid that you already know the answer to. That's gonna be. I mean, okay, they pregnant paused and like dramaed it for something. Daughter, and you're like,
what?
Of course, it's just stupid. So fail for understanding computers and fail for a crappy name. I mean, why not choose a foreign language? I mean, make it daughter. You're like, oh frick. I mean, they could have chosen a foreign name. In fact, it could have been French for daughter for all I care, given
actually, you know what? That's actually a good point because and we'll wrap up on this, which is if the name had been daughter and they just said the name and it was like Vorshinaire, and you're like, oh, the name was Vorshinaire. I'm trying to sound Frenchy. I don't know where.
Yeah, whatever.
You're like Le Frenchy, Le Vauchenet. You're like Le Vauchenet, and you're like, oh, okay, it's named. But Picard has like a look, and you're like, oh, and then they could, that kind of leads to him going, oh, we're not told the exact name right then. But that would have been a little better drama. So well called, well played there. So we'll wrap
Also,
up on
one
that.
other
Oh,
thing just popped
yep,
in my
yep,
mind.
yep.
It also doesn't make sense that he would have called it daughter, because the only reason it was created as a daughter was because John Maddox later did it. So I don't know why David would call it daughter.
Um, yeah, the only reason I do kind of don't that doesn't bug me personally on that one is because there was a little bit of data, and I believe in Next Generation talking about that kind of stuff, like because there was
He had a daughter, Data, technically.
yeah, I was
Maybe
gonna say there
kind of,
was a
sort of.
daughtery thing with the thing, so it wouldn't surprise.
Lara.
So it wouldn't that part didn't really bug me because that was kind of the cool thing. That's why Data's such a great character to me because they allowed that slowly humanity to develop and his painting, his violin playing, his love for the cat. Um, those are like awesome traits to see a character that's trying to excel and be human. Because obviously the irony, I think they even accounted for it in the original show, which was the fact that they're like, why do you want to be more human when you're superior in every way in the sense of what you are? But
Yeah.
even what made him interesting, he acknowledged that, yeah, I'm physically and like technologically more sophisticated than a human in a lot of ways, but I don't have your spark, like of
Yep.
the creativity and that kind of thing. What's made again that's the cool part when it said the more positive side of the show and stuff like that. So
I
I guess
agree. I bet you most people would tell you that Data's probably, if not their favorite, their like second favorite character in
I
Star
would
Trek because
say,
of his advancement of character.
yeah, I would say he's probably most people's top three. Definitely
Oh,
top,
definitely.
definitely top five. If he's not in top five, it's just you don't like the character because of a reason, right? Like if you're like, okay, what character is the biggest one? You're like, well, Data, Picard, and insert your other one. Like the next couple ones are kind of,
Exactly.
you're like I'd probably throw, Geordie's in there. You have Geordie in there. You have Will. You have, um, I did see a list. I think it was Jay Exec. He had a hilarious list on Twitter he put up, and it was like Geordie was like number 8 or something. But it was pretty funny though. 'Cause I was like, oh, I put Geordie higher than that. But it was funny because someone put a comment and they're like, no, your number one's wrong. I think his number one was Data. But like his number one's wrong, and they inserted Barkley, which I actually quite appreciated because I wouldn't put him as number one,
That's funny.
but as a character that lasted through both Next Generation and Voyager, and actually has, I think, in the history of Star Trek, I would say that Barkley is probably the most developed character arc in the entire series. I don't think anybody surpasses him in that.
Oh, I completely agree. But it's also because they set the bar so low for that character. I mean, he is the nincompoops of nincompoops.
Oh, but
I mean, there's no way he ever would have survived Starfleet.
Other than he was just super genius. I mean, he was super smart.
That's true. That's good. That's a good point. He just couldn't figure out how to put his pants on.
He just
retarded.
He was just he had well he had a thing. He actually in a way was what we talked about in the review, which is he had the most relatable thing in the world, which was legitimate holographic addiction. Which again, if holodecks existed, I would say that 95% of all society
pretty legitimate for a lot of people.
Oh yeah, like I said, you're like, what? Again, when we saw the technology, how advanced holodecks are, you're like, who needs friends when you have fake friends that are perfect? I mean, like in the sense of, and like,
or the fact that you could eat and live in there your entire life because it's basically a replicator that's giving you food. I mean, you would have everything you needed.
Yeah,
everything.
Like I said, holodecks would be the end of civilization. So
yes,
I love it. So thank you everyone for our follow-up wrap-up conversation. We haven't named this segment yet. We're gonna name it something interesting though, because this isn't really a main review. This is more it's kind of like
it should be called Conversations That I Should Have Monetized the First Time.
No, because if you ever watch like we talked about Grand Tour, where they're like the Conversation Street, and we're like, well, we can't name it that, so it's Conversation Highway. Who knows?
Something, yeah.
It's the walkway,
derivative.
Conversation Walkway. because we're not quite as funny as they are on this stuff. But
No.
we have to work on that. We'll have to do some black and white animation. But anyway, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.